During conference, Guruji was often asked posture-based questions, such as, what is the degree of the angle of legs in Trikonasana? Or in Marichyasana, which hand grabs what wrist? Guruji would often reply, you're asking the wrong question. What sorts of questions did you ask him when you first met him? How did your questions to him and ensuing conversations evolve during your relationship with him? What do you wish you could ask him now? Do you wish you could ask him now? How did your questions to him evolve during your relationship with him? What sorts of questions did you ask when you first met him? Dena.
I didn't ask Guruji any questions. I think the whole situation was so overwhelming, and I felt that until I had a question worth asking, I wasn't going to ask one. And there was plenty of questions asked over the period of time, and there was that response from him. You know, the favourite one was, why is the shoulder stand before the head stand? And every time it was asked, you could see Guruji just want to shoot himself in the head. And I remember a time when one of the students asked Guruji about the nature of the Kundalini rising, and we all sat back, and he spoke for about 45 minutes in a mixture between Kannada and a little Sanskrit in between. And at the end of 45 minutes, the student that he asked said, I'm sorry, Guruji, I don't fully understand. You know, I have a minimal grasp on Kannada and Sanskrit. And Guruji said, it does not matter which language I am speaking in. You will not understand. So mostly I just watch and listen. In the beginning he called every female Mary. You kind of had to come back a few times before you were worthy of your own name. Sometime after I became Dena, and there was a long period where I felt that Guruji was harsh with me, not overly affectionate. So I wasn't confident to go into a chitty-chatty situation with him. It was always, where have you been? Why are you so stiff? Why don't you practice? You know, and I'm thinking, I just got back. I only left 3 months ago. I practice every day, and my foot's behind my head 3 or 4 times, wrapped around my neck. My belly so stiff. And you know, there was a lot of that, you know, bad lady thing that he did, and I took it literally. So it took quite a while to develop my own sense of self-worth. And then when that finally happened, which was, you know, a good decade or so, bad lady is very fine lady, haha. And the teaching in that was to just take your time and go through the process and learn what it is that you have to learn. But it's not about a question or an answer to a question, but about allowing the process, the practice, to unfold within you and act as the Guru. Because so often a question that you have, the answer is just around the corner in your own process. And I think people ask questions a lot because they like to hear the sound of their own voice. They like to be seen or acknowledged by the teacher. They don't really care about the answer to the question. And in acknowledging that, I had the greatest respect for Pattabhidas and what he offered, and what he offered us in the classroom situation. And I felt very grateful for that. And then the rest of the time I just wanted him to do what he wanted to do. And when he'd finished being so intensely involved with the students, he liked to read the newspaper. And I just wanted him to have that. So I didn't go and say, hey, look at me some more. What can you tell me about me? More about me. But The thing that Guruji liked to talk about was not yoga so much. He loved a little romance. He wanted to know, who wrote you that letter? Who's that letter from? Is that from a boy? No, what's wrong with you? No one writes to you.
Letters came to his home. He knew every letter that was coming through.
Yeah, he picked up each letter and it was like he was Santa Claus. He'd look at the letter, the back of the letter.
This is from your mother.
Yeah. And then, what's wrong? Nobody boy writing? Why? So yeah, he asked questions like, what house are you staying in? How many rooms are in that house? Who else is in that house?
Do you wish you could ask him something now?
Yeah. I'm sort of in agreement with Dena, though, that I wouldn't really want to pester him with yoga questions. Like, the whole conference phenomena didn't really come about till probably the late 90s after Guruji's wife passed away. One year I was staying in the little house next door, the old yoga shop, the temple house. So I used to come over in the afternoon just for coffee, and Guruji was quite devastated by his wife's death, and he was sad. And we would sit and we would talk about Mom. We would cry. Sorry. So, in the beginning, the whole concept of conference was just sort of sitting with each other and enjoying each other's company, feeling the sweetness of his presence. And it sort of evolved into this kind of awkward scene where a lot of people would be crowded into the little sitting room of his house and sitting around in oftentimes an uncomfortable silence, everybody trying to think of the right question to ask. And then, someone would say, so, Guruji, is the rapper the grabber? Or and, Guruji would just get this very, sort of quizzical look on his face, like, how could you possibly ask me that question? Someone would say, Guruji, when you jump through, should you jump through with your legs crossed or your legs straight? It would be the same expression. Or, when you jump back, should you jump back with your arms straight or your elbows bent? Same expression. And then, oftentimes Guruji would finally say, any way you do, yoga is for seeing God in all things. It's like, don't get caught up in the minutia. Don't get caught up in triviality. Remember what's important. And so, it seems like the best conversations that happened were just completely sort of accidental and spontaneous, where he would just start telling stories. He would talk about his past sometimes, and talk about how he was once like the badminton champion of Mysore. That, he once got an opportunity to act in a dramatization of the Mahabharata. Gave a performance that people still talk about it. Or, I went to play football. So I love those stories, I didn't want to sit there and milk him for information about yoga, because he was always giving so much. And, I remember my friend Graham Northfield, Dena's first teacher, used to say that not to toot my own horn, but he would say oftentimes that Guruji would just be buried in the newspaper in conference, and then someone that he really felt a lot of fondness for, like myself, would walk into the room. All of a sudden, Guruji would drop the newspaper and smile, say, "Oh, team, what news?" And then things would lighten up. And, Graham said, when I walked into the room, Guruji would never even lower the newspaper. Can I tell one more story about Graham? He's not here to defend himself.
You'll see the recording.
Back in the day, in the early days of us going to Mysore, a lot of us would ask Guruji for spiritual names, because we wanted to ditch our shallow, materialistic Western culture and adopt this new spiritual lifestyle and Indian philosophy. So people say, "Guruji, could you give me a spiritual name?" And Guruji would always kind of go. And then, as he would do in many matters of importance, he would turn to his wife and say, she would whisper something into his ear. He'd go, "Oh." So it was a ma that gave me my spiritual name. But then Graham one day asked for a spiritual name. And if you've ever met Graham, he has a very unusually shaped skull. He's a nice looking guy. He's a very sweet guy. I shouldn't finish this story. I've gone too far to turn back.
He was a bonehead. He was from France.
Yeah. So, anyway, Graham asked Guruji for a spiritual name, and Guruji turned to Amma, and Amma whispered something into Guruji's ear, and Guruji says, "Ah, yes, cucumber head." Sorry, Graham, I love you dearly.
Hello, you too.
I hope this never gets back to me.
Eddie just texted it out.
Hashtag Graham Northfield.
Well, I'm kind of in the same situation as Dena. When I first met him and was learning, I didn't ask him anything. I was reeling from the energy that was happening, and I feel like those of us that had the amazing opportunity to have his hands touching us every posture, the answers were coming through his hands. So I felt like I knew what he was wanting to say. But when I started teaching publicly these workshops, and I had to use words for what happened, I wanted to have confidence when I would say to someone, they asked me the questions. I always thought it was quite amusing that Guruji would answer the questions, keep your mind on God, and then the students always ask us the questions and expect us to answer which hand grabs, what does this, all this. So I started keeping a list of the questions people asked me, and when I would go to Mysore, this is in the last 10 years of his life, I would pull out this list and I'd say, "Guruji, I have a list of questions for you." And he'd always look at me like, "What?" "You know the answers." And I say, "I think I know the answers, Guruji, but I want to be able to say to people that you directly said this, this, or this, so that it's not coming from my intuition, my assumption." So I asked him quite a lot of questions near as I say, the last 10 years of his life about all those crazy things about which hand grabs, what do you roll over your feet, how do you jump through, things that you were going to ask me so that I could say to you definitively, I had the answer from him. And every time he did look at me like I was really quite mad. I had heard many years ago that a good student does not ask questions, just does what the guru says. So that kind of became my mode of operation. And then when I started to write these questions down, one of the questions I had was a specific question about a posture, Kurmasan to Supta Kurmasan. In the yoga room, in his shala, every day I saw people sitting up between the two, sticking both feet behind their head, and then laying down again. I thought that was incorrect. So I asked him, I said, Guruji, Supta Kurmasan, how do you get to Supta Kurmasan? Sitting up? He said, incorrect. I said, Guruji, many, many people in your room today were doing that. He said, asking, telling. I'm like, oh great. So people, he wouldn't offer some of these things. So if you had been taught by him and he put you in it, you did the way he taught you. And it may have been that some people, he had them sit up. I don't know. Sharat tells me that when people learn Dvipad, he has them sit up after that. But people imitate each other in the yoga room. So nobody was really getting direct information from him. And I thought, this asking, telling was one of those moments of like, oh great, there's no right answer. It's what you're taught, you do what you're taught. And then you continue doing it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you need to look elsewhere. So I actually have quite a few questions I'd like to ask him. Some of them are quite personal, about my own practice, how to proceed, because he took me through a healing crisis, and I feel like he knows me better than anybody but myself, even maybe better than I know myself. So every day I have questions that I could ask him. I know one I wonder if any of you have ever asked him where he came up with the pranayama order. Where did that come from? Because I know Manju teaches it differently. Other people have combined pranayamas in a different way, and that's something on the level of just the practice I'm really quite curious about. I don't know where it came from, how it got to be where it is, but otherwise, yeah, I think every day I think of him, I have something I would like to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did give the ask the question thing a go a couple of times because I, like Nancy, was really interested in the specifics, particularly taking on the role of a teacher. You want to get it right as you can. And so mostly, I tried to record a lot of things, and he was very generous with that. Like he would sit and very, very slowly say the names of the poses, and let me record the pranayama because I was just so in shock when I was learning it that I needed to be able to hear things over and over again. But often the result of asking a question, I'd say, this is just a silly example, but Guruji, how many breaths in a headstand? And he would say, 50 breaths, you take 100. So what I found was that every time I tried to ask a practical question, that it ended up being like a catch-22, where the answer was kind of impossible to kind of, you couldn't catch it. And then after a while I thought, this is very much the Indian way, Do you go right? Do you go left? Is it right? Oh, yes, madam. No. I always left a little bit like that. And so I think that the message in that sometimes is, to teach according to time, place, and circumstance, and to find your way between the possibilities and seek the truth as it evolves. Something like that.
If I could ask Guruji a question now, I'd probably ask him for a teaching certificate.
Mine's not for sale. That was, those are just judgment calls.
Yeah, you wise judgment on his part.
No, I don't think so at all.
One of the things with Guruji was knowing the right question to ask. And if if you asked him the right question or something he was interested in, he would go on for a long time. He had a lot to say. He was very erudite on many topics related to grammar, poetry, Sanskrit, philosophy, yoga, metaphysics. He knew a lot of this stuff, and we just had a language barrier with him. But if you asked him the right question, he would try to struggle through it, and you could learn a lot of interesting things. When I started with him, I didn't know what Ashtanga yoga was. I didn't know who he was. I'd never seen jump back sun salutation. I'd never seen anything that he was doing. I'd gone and knocked on his door because I was looking for yoga stuff. And so when I went back the next year, the first year I didn't practice with him, but when I went back the next year, I had no idea what anything was. It was totally new, and I really liked it. And but I was mainly interested in philosophy type of things, as maybe you can tell. And so through the years, a lot of the questions that I asked him were related to, the thing that I really wanted to learn from him was Sanskrit. And that was one of the main things I wanted to learn. And I was willing to do as many asanas as it took until he could teach me some Sanskrit. So when finally he started teaching Sharat and myself some of the Upanishads and Gita and stuff like that, that's where I got to ask him questions pertaining to the texts. And so in terms of yoga questions, specifically technical things, I didn't have a lot of stuff to ask about. But I did have a lot to ask about when it came to philosophy or Upanishads or Gita and stuff like that. And he was super forthcoming. But a stupid question? No, you would take practice.
You call on the rest of us stupid, Ben.
Pretty much. I didn't know if you would pick it up that quickly.
There'll be time for sparring later.
I might be blonde, but I've still got my hair.
I love you too, Dena.
So many different ways to think of it, and I've contemplated it and realized over the years that, like Eddie was saying, many times I realize now we don't know what question to ask. And Pattabhi Jois made that clear. In one of his conferences, someone asked him a very long, convoluted question about the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna and Arjuna, and Krishna being confused about his Dharma and having Arjuna there to advise him about his Dharma, and if Arjuna was confused and Krishna was his advisor, what's our chance of understanding our Dharma? Pattabhi Jois would go off and answer in Sanskrit and Kannada and quoting things like 20 minutes, and other people would ask about what color should I paint my yoga room, and where did I buy the castor oil you told me about to put in the coffee, or all this stuff. And then the second time the person says, Guruji, I don't think you understood my question. What I was asking, they ask it in a longer way. And he just goes off again, and he's animated, and he's answering it on and on. A third time, the student raises their hand and asks the same question in another way, and he looks and goes, "Whoa! My answer is correct. Your question is not correct." So he's like, he was saying, my answer was rocking, but you're not asking the right questions here. So that was part of it. And so I think back on questions I asked, and the most I learned from the questions I asked were the ones he didn't give an answer to. And that sounds odd, but I asked him, of course, some trivial things and some specific things about pranayama and kumbhaka or something. But one of the biggest questions I asked, and it's too long to even tell the whole story, what happened next, but I had been there, I learned all these series, and I came back to the States, and I was confused and bewildered and sore and smelled like tiger balm and had no money and couldn't figure out how to function in society and normal occurrence coming back from India. And so I wrote him a letter. Dear Guruji, I hope you're doing well. Thank you for teaching me. Some questions seem to have arisen in my mind, and I wonder if you would just mind answering these for me. For instance, where the 48 limbs. It seems like all we're doing is asanas and pranayama, which about pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Like, where's the samadhi man? So, would you mind answering some other things that seem to have arisen in my mind since I've been doing this practice? Like, who am I? What's the purpose of life? Who's God? Oh, me! You mail him a letter and he never writes back. Right, which sent me on like a 12-year exploration to find all these answers, and I came right back to things that he did say. That was, do your practice, and I realized for my personal, just for me, that I think answers are overrated, and the mistake is seeking an answer, because somehow an answer